Once upon a time, the devil asked me for my soul, but I didn't know how to answer. To be a little more precise, I was at a party in the mountains in my early 20s, and to say I had drunk a little too much is a very big understatement. I was in the middle stages of alcohol poisoning. I was vomiting out everything in my system. I was shivering and shaking, lying next to a campfire. And there was a moment when I looked across the flames, and as the light played on my friend Wayne's face, he looked for all the world like the devil himself. And I was certain in that strange, surreal, painful moment that the devil was going to ask me for my soul in exchange for taking away the pain. But before I could answer, before I could even conceive of an answer, I felt an urge, and I rolled over and tried to push my lower intestines out of my mouth. And then I rolled back, and the moment had passed, and Wayne was just Wayne. And I didn't know how I would have answered the question. Once upon a time, a young prince vied against many others for the hand of a fairy queen, but when he won her, they parted ways. I was 20 when I returned from my junior year of college to Boulder. And that summer, I was introduced by friends of friends to a woman. And when I say it was love at first sight, I'm trite, but it's true. It was overwhelming. It was the kind of love you have when you're 20 years old and you're just blown away. She was 19. She was the definition of manic pixie girl, one of those young women that anybody that met her wanted to be part of the crazy adventure that was her life. She was utterly gorgeous. She was wise beyond her years with the kind of wisdom that comes from having to grow up too fast, and the kind of damage that comes with that too. And the kind of damage that made every young man that met her want to wrap her in their arms and tell her it would be all right. And she met many young men that summer, and she chose me. And it felt like eternity. It was amazing. It was epic. It was adventurous, and it was sweaty. But when I look back on it now, it was a month and a half long. That was all. And September came, and I was to fly 1,800 miles back to New York, and she was to begin her first year of college at CSU in Fort Collins. And there was a moment when I had this wild thought, why am I doing this? I've been doing hardcore academia for high school and college. Why am I going back? I should follow her. I should find a job, any job I can get. I should ask her to marry me and do anything I can to stay with her. But that would have been silly. And so I flew back to New York. I thought we'd spend a year and then we'd be back together and it would be eternity. Once upon a time, there was a young woman that instead of following the path laid out for her, she took what little money she had left and bought a plane ticket to southern France, to Provence. And there she got a job as a beekeeper upon a farm that abutted up against a great field of lavender flowers. And when the shadows swirled around her soul, she would go and sit, and the smell of the flowers and the wind and the stalks, it would soothe her soul. This was the story she wrote in a blog that I and maybe one or two other people knew was not the truth, that many people followed, thinking that instead of going to college, she had in fact flown to France. And all those trials and tribulations you go through as a freshman in college were played out in that story in France. And the times we spent long hours in the night talking on the phone were her times in the lavender fields. And then the shadows did grow close around her, and a young man at school began stalking her. And there came a night when he tried to rape her. And when the dragon reared its head, there was a prince who drew his sword and stood between the dragon and the fairy queen. And his name was Andrew. And he saved her. Fairy tale style, he saved her, and they were married 2 years later. And to this day, I believe they are married. And it was 2 days later that in that story, the lavender fields burned to the ground. But when I look back on that time, my early 20s, when I did a lot of really stupid things, it's not the things that I did that I regret. It's the questions I don't know the answers to. Would you sell your soul to take away the pain? Yes or no? Would you marry me? Yes or no? Questions unanswered. Once upon a time.